Oh, yeah. And mother of
Okay,
children.
all right, we're live. Okay,
What do you say?
we are,
Married. I don't want to marry.
we are live. We'll try. Excuse me, we are live. This is your Senate Transportation Committee. It's Thursday morning, excuse me, February 9th. And we're going to start off this morning with the auto dealers, Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association. And we have a new person representing them, and Matt Coda. It's a new person. And so Matt, tell us a little something about yourself and what's your representation of the auto dealers.
Thank you very much, Senator Moners, members of the Senate Transportation Committee. My name is Matt Coda. I own a nonprofit trade association management and government advocacy firm called Meadow Hill. One of my clients is the Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association, which is a nonprofit trade association of 125 businesses across the state in the business of keeping Vermonters moving, selling cars, trucks, auto supply parts, both used and new. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about this organization, what they do.
Yes. you took her on.
This is
That's Marilyn.
So-
Marilyn retired, and I was just told that she's in order, I think, with her mother in winter or something. You
Yes.
said, or
Yeah, so that's a great question, because Marilyn Miller officially retired on the 31st. My organization, my company, took over the management of the Vermont Vehicle Automotive Distributors Association officially on October 1st. We still have staff, particularly to handle the insurance programs that are run through the Vermont auto dealers. Also to run the AutoCap program, which is this program that we have with the Vermont Attorney General's office to address complaints about between consumers and dealers and the Attorney General's office. And that office is up in Berlin at the Central Vermont Chamber of Commerce building. My organization, just for full disclosure, also lobbies for the heating oil and propane industry, as well as the heating service industry. So cars, trucks, oil and gas is my portfolio.
Very popular item this year.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just amazed about a lot of stuff here.
I always appreciate, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, I just hit the cops. Sorry.
You got money here. She got money here.
$5.
Look at that.
I'm gonna balance the budget.
Don't put that too close to me.
So,
$4.99.
Yeah, right.
so Marilyn Miller, just to put a finer point on it, started with the Vermont Vehicle Vermont Automobile Dealers Association, that was his name then, 43 years ago. She was the executive director of that organization for 41 years.
Wow. Yeah, I all remember her. That's the only person I ever knew that.
So
It's no longer impressive when I hear these numbers after EOT said they have an employee that's been there for over 60 years.
Right.
It's hard to beat that.
that is very hard to beat,
Yeah.
especially when the pension kicks in at 30, right?
She looks so young.
Oh. That is a good one. Wait till we're done with it this morning. Oh, my.
So
I'm not too far behind. I started in state government in '67.
Yeah, but not the same job.
No,
No.
Real estate.
no.
Yeah, she did it for 43 years just with.
just for the auto dealers.
So, Matt, then is this, this is one client within your portfolio,
That's correct.
as opposed to, I think Marilyn Miller just was she only did the Beta piece.
Right. And what Meadow Hill does that's a little different from other advocacy firms is we also manage nonprofit trade associations. So the Fuel Dealers Association, the Heating and Cooling Contractors of Vermont, and Split the Ticket, which is a charity, a heating systems charity, are four nonprofit organizations, which I not only advocate for, but I also actively manage their day-to-day operations. In addition to that, I also advocate for other entities, but don't provide management services for.
You want to take us through this or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
So as the position of the, Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association is new and used cars. It's primarily new. We've got 92 stores, new car stores in Vermont, not 92 individual owners, but individual stores. selling franchise new car sellers. And is our position that VADA and our national association, NADA, the National Auto Dealers Association, that the franchise system, which we've had in place here in the United States for many, many years, is the most effective and efficient way that we can deliver vehicles to consumers, both internal combustion engine vehicles and now electric vehicles. The second page just shows you where we're at in 2022. As we say, the most popular vehicles in Vermont, most popular cars are not cars. They're CUVs, they're SUVs, they're pickups, and they're vans. 88% of the new and used vehicles sold in Vermont in 2022 fit that category. It's what Vermonters prefer to buy. We also sell twice as many used cars as we do new cars in Vermont. So about 100,000 cars total in 2022 in Vermont. These are cars that are sold, let me correct that. These are cars that are sold and registered new, whether they're used or new. They could be purchased in New Hampshire, they could be purchased in Florida, but they're registered in Vermont as a new vehicle. They're not a renewal of a registration.
Well, I sure our purchase use tax was up last week when I looked at the chart. I think it was 68 million, or so, 68,000. You know, I mean, a lot of big numbers that we on vehicles this year.
That's correct, and that's what you hear from the economists, as you all know, which is even though sales were down, in fact, sales were down not just here in Vermont by about 16%. Prices are up, and they're more purchase and use, even though we're having lower volume.
There were some people getting more for the used vehicle than they paid for it. Very often that was happening. If the car vehicle was a couple of years old, they were getting their money back, but you know they bought the new.
And that is due to, and it's not just a Vermont issue, the global supply crunch, but sales of vehicles in 2022 prior to 2021 in Vermont for passenger vehicles down 20%, for trucks down 16% overall. It's about 17, 18%. That's mirroring what's happening across the country because of supply chain issues. And you know, because if you drove Route 7 this summer, South Burlington, Shelburne, Middlebury, Rutland, you saw something strange, pavement, because that's where the cars usually are. And in lots, new car lots were the smallest cars were on that, smallest total number of cars on that lot in recent history was this summer, because we weren't able to get the cars. And it's not just Vermont, because of supply chain issues.
Okay, this brings me to the point that really, I've been very supportive of the dealers throughout the state for many years. I was very, very upset this year when I heard dealers were charging above sticker on new cars, trucks. To me, that was wrong. Even the manufacturers did not like it. They were condemning that practice because that sticker price on the car is supposed to be the price. And how they were going above sticker because of supply and demand was beyond me. I mean, I've never seen that happen in all the years that I've been sitting in this chair. For that to happen, and I'd like to know the reasoning behind why they were doing that, other than making extra money. Now, I know the supply wasn't there, but if a car or truck says 68,000, and they were charging 72 or 73 because they couldn't get the vehicle. So I'd like some explanation on that. Sure. I'm not shy about that one. That one's bothered me.
But let me ask, didn't a few years ago when you were looking at a Camaro or something that was very special, they were actually having a buyer premium in order to get them because they were so scarce? Do you know?
I don't. All I know is the cars were in showrooms with a sticker on them.
Well, I thought there have been times when you had a specialty car and there was a very limited demand. This was much more broad. This was very. It seems like there have been times in the past where there might have been a premium to get a
There
very.
probably was rare auto. There was, in the 20 years I was in that business, we had one where a Viper had come in.
Again, maybe that's what I'm
And
thinking.
it was, but I can tell you even then, and that was probably in the late 90s when that car first came out, or right around in there. And it didn't go over very well even then. You know, people didn't like it.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
remember paying a lot more than usual things. I remember paying $50 for a haircut just because there weren't any haircuts during the pandemic. So I mean, a lot of things were.
Did your wife
overpriced
charge
at
you
that
that
time.
much?
No, it's an honor.
There were things that were going.
We're a different subject here.
Yeah.
Eggs gone up, prices have gone up. What I'm saying, the manufacturer is against that. You talk to any manufacturer, they send that car through with a sticker, retail price on that sticker. That sticker is everybody. Now you can, the trade-in, you can do what you want. But the sticker was the word that car was being sold for. Whether you went to Essex or Shelburne or wherever, that same car had the same sticker on it. That's my understanding. Let me, maybe I'd be correct. Help me.
So the sticker, of course, is the manufacturer's suggested
That's
retail
right.
price.
That's
It
correct.
is suggested.
Mhm.
Sometimes it sells below, sometimes it sells above, sometimes it sells at. You are accurate. It's not a Vermont issue.
No.
Across the country, I'm just quoting a recent article from Car and Driver magazine, which some of you may read, which shows that this is nationally, cars are selling above sticker, and particularly in the luxury car market, where, for example, Mercedes-Benz purchasers pay between 2% and 4% more than sticker price nationally. For when it comes to other cars, not luxury cars, usually it's been about 1%. It can be more. But part of the problem with any commodity, whether you're selling cars or oil or eggs, is that if your volume decreases, and your fixed costs have not or are going up, still gotta pay your mortgage, still gotta pay your employees, still gotta pay your taxes, still gotta pay your car loans. And your volumes have decreased through no fault of your own, but because of the manufacturers aren't delivering or the supply chain inhibits them from delivering, you still gotta pay those bills. And when there's great demand because of lack of inventory and an opportunity to make up for that loss of volume, different sellers of commodities will act appropriately, which gets you to above the suggested retail price.
So that's gonna be common practice for the manufacturer. Am I correct in saying they're opposed to this?
The manufacturers, when they publish the retail price, that is done, that's not a dynamic price, right? That sticker gets printed, that suggestion gets added when they manufacture that car, based on what they think is an appropriate markup for them and markup for their franchisees.
Right.
But the dynamics on the ground, whether you're in Orange County, California, or Orange County, Vermont, may be different 6 months later, 9 months later, when that car is on your lot.
And then when you mention other products, you can't go to 2 grocery stores and find eggs the same price. There's no suggested retail. You're talking about somebody that if I bought this car in Rutland or Barry or Chittenden County, the suggested retail is on that sticker for a reason. Now, if they want to do away with that, that's fine. I understand the profit, why you're gonna make more profit to sell less cars, but I think it's unfair to the consumer that's happening, that's,
But part of that absolutely is consumer education. You could go to a Ford dealership, there's 14 Ford dealerships in Vermont. Some you might pay MSRP, some you might pay a little bit more, some you might pay a little bit less.
So that's common now.
Yes.
And it's suggested.
That's the future then. So the sticker doesn't mean anything.
And well, it's a good judge, just like Kelley Blue Book is a good judge of what you're gonna get for a new or used car.
Used cars are different. It's what the person wants to pay for that used car because there's no sticker on it. Like I said, you can make it up on used cars if someone comes into your dealership, but I'm just surprised to know that now that sticker price with the manufacturer supports is now being disregarded because they're selling less cars and they can get away with it. So I guess that's the common thing that's going to happen.
It's definitely not a Vermont issue. So when I say common, according to the data that's collected by Car and Driver, which is an independent, journals, trade journal. Yeah, it's happening across the country.
All right.
And perhaps to get worse, quite frankly, because of what's happening in the next part of the presentation regarding both EVs and catalytic converters. So I'll skip to the end. If you have less vehicles on your lot, your volume goes down, your fixed costs are the same. You have to make your mortgage. You are going to need to increase your profitability or your margin. And then you have this, what is the most problematic crime for auto dealers, which is the theft of catalytic converters on their car lots.
Yeah, well, that's a different subject altogether.
The-
Look up for that.
The issue is that when someone comes in and steals 10 catalytic converters, getting those, you can't drive that car, you can't sell that car until it's fixed. You don't have 10 cats in the service department. You gotta order that. That could take a week, that could take 2 weeks. You're out 60 grand, fine. But you also don't have that inventory on your lot, even though it's on your lot. And that's been part of the,
Having said that, Walmart, Shaw's, Price Chopper going through the same thing with stealing groceries or shopping carts full.
Yeah.
Home Depot, that's what's happening in the stealing market. I know catalytic converters are a problem because you can't repair them tomorrow morning. You gotta fix them before they sell. You can't get the parts to make up the difference. So I just want to understand one more time. So when the volume comes back and the dealers are maxed out on their inventory, then they'll lower the price. They won't follow suggested retail. If they're doing more volume.
Or they
so,
might go with the
yes.
suggested.
If those cars are on the lot and they will not move,
Yeah.
you'll see the price go down.
Oh, yeah,
As
right.
with, I mean, they're competing with one another. You know, the Ford dealership in Shelburne Road is competing with the Ford dealership in Morrisville. And people can check their prices pretty easily online.
Yes,
But
What is their motivation to have an MSRP, and are there other products in other industries that have a similar type thing
don't know about it.
Clothing does.
as an MSRP?
A lot of clothing comes with a tag that has a suggested price.
yeah, but the clothing's not controlled by, you don't get the same jeans at Kohl's or Walmart with a suggested retail from the manufacturer. They put their own price on.
No, I don't think so. I remember going down to Farmway and, you know, all the name brands come with a price.
Is there-
Yeah, that's suggested by the company. Then they mark it down.
Is this number used for any tax purposes? Is the MSRP used in any way for the amount that it's?
No, it's not illegal. I mean, like I said, it's just customer, I don't think it's illegal, other than the manufacturer has still maintained that they should go by the sticker price. That's all. They don't have to, they can, I'm sure, go with as they want.
Well, you know, we had a lot of testimony too on that whole relationship between manufacturer, franchise, and dealerships, and, you know, what some of those practices mean for dealerships. And so, you know, I guess, and I'm only, I know Abel's been on saying that he doesn't charge above what is suggested.
That's right, he doesn't
And he's
have that,
marketed
yeah.
that. He's got a lot of dealerships. But on the other hand, there may be dealerships where the fixed price and the fact that they've got less inventory to generate the income are in a position where they can't maybe adhere to that. I don't know. I just, sometimes that relationship, based on what we've heard in the past, can be really tough on dealerships. And I don't know if this is one of the areas or not, but the manufacturer hasn't got the same individual considerations, I guess. But I don't know. It's a consumer beware kind of issue, I guess.
And quite frankly, so, well, the auto manufacturers supported the zero emission vehicle regulations, which will deliver increasing numbers of battery electric vehicles to Vermont. The Vermont Auto Dealers Association was neutral. We do have concerns, and some of those concerns are reflected in inventory and MSRP, as our dynamic, particularly the dealerships along the Connecticut River, and how that plays out over the next 10 years. So just to, and I'll get to that here in a second, just to briefly go over the side. Subaru is often called the Vermont's informal car or whatever, or national, it's our third most popular brand, right? Toyota, Ford, then Subaru. You can see the 10 most popular brands purchased and registered in Vermont in 2022. That's the Vermont Vehicle Index, which is data from Experian Auto Count. And as said before, the most popular cars in Vermont are not cars, they're CUVs, SUVs, trucks and pickups. And you see that in the RAV4 Tacoma, Ford F-150 being 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the most popular vehicles purchased and registered in Vermont, new and used in 2022. It comes to battery electric brands, not talking about plug-in hybrids or gas hybrids, just pure battery electric hybrids. Tesla tops, over 400 cars were purchased and registered in Vermont in 2022, followed by Nissan, Chevrolet, Volkswagen, and Ford, and that's going to change, right? So that's 1.7% of total market share in 2022. That's new and used, 1,718 vehicles. That's 4.3% of all new vehicle sales. When you add in hybrids and plug-in hybrids, so gas, electric hybrids, and plug-in hybrids, which also have gas, that increases it obviously 13.2% of new vehicle sales and 66.3% of all sales. But as you can see in the pie chart, our cars are driven by gas. Our vehicles are driven mostly by gas. But that's going to change if we are going to reach the mandates in the Global Warming Solutions Act, because the Climate Action Plan says we ought to have 27,000 EVs in 2025 and 126,000 by the end of the decade. That's a big number.
Now, you have this by vehicle as well, not just printing.
I have it all.
You've got all.
I've got, it's a
Well, it's in the sources.
Experian Auto Count, which I have
Look
a,
at that.
Well, you know, it's this thing, yeah, it's Tesla, without a dealership, they sold most electric cars.
No.
Imagine it, but that's.
Soon they'll have
No,
a
no,
maintenance.
they'll have it, that's right, no, seriously, without a dealership to sell that many,
Yeah.
ahead of everybody else, that's big numbers, I think.
Nissan would be the lead.
And they were, at one point it was $1,000. It was a good deal, so a lot of people bought it.
Chevy has the Bolt.
Where do you buy Rivians?
Bolt, right? They still have the Bolt.
Rivian is a direct consumer.
That's another direct.
Yeah, you gotta buy it online.
What was it? I don't know, yeah.
Rivian, yeah, it's an all electric truck.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I saw a couple, Southern New Hampshire, Rivians.
The challenge, of course, and one of the reasons why South Burlington will likely be the home,
Right,
not for sure yet, but likely be the home of the Tesla service center, is the challenge when you don't have the franchise system in a new car.
Yeah,
Is there something that goes wrong?
you gotta send it to Boston or they pick it up or
Right.
something, you know.
And if you have something that goes wrong with your Ford or your Chevy or your Dodge, take it right to the dealership, no cost.
That's what I'm saying, I'm amazed they sold that many cars without having any dealership here, they gotta pick them up and service them, I guess, that's what they were doing. I think they came to pick up your car, brought it.
So you had to take it.
Yeah,
If it was a small thing, they actually have mobile.
it's all in
come out to
cabinet.
you.
Oh,
But if it's something like major, you gotta put it on a flatbed and take it to.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's why I wanted
And
the
that's a
ability to fix it here.
significant capital expense, but Tesla's capitalization is a lot different than most startups. They're different animal entirely.
well, yeah. if
It'd
they
be
have
hard
one
for to
charging
replicate
station.
what they've done.
And I noticed they have a new bank of chargers up in the mall in St. Johnsbury on Route 5. Well, they have a
Just
whole
Tesla?
bank.
Just
Tesla.
Yeah, they have their own, nobody can use that, right?
Right, that's right.
Wow.
It's interesting, 13.2 of new sales, in fact, are EVs or hybrids and plug-in.
Plug-in hybrids or gas hybrids. Plug-in gas hybrids or just gas electric hybrids.
Yeah, okay, 13.2. Now, we've been talking about 15% would be the trigger point to really start looking at gas tax replacement. So is that 13.2 what we would use?
Plug-ins, I think. But this includes hybrids that aren't plugged in, the 13.2.
Yes.
So that's my question. It's,
It's like, there's tons of Priuses out there that would be part of that 13%.
and they're brand new?
So the Priuses have been hybrid for
No,
over
these
10
say-
years.
Of new car sales is 13.2.
Yeah.
Prius is still doing that model even now as a new vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
So these are new and used cars, so new to me. So if I buy a used Prius, it would be included in that numbers. I've registered them, not a renewal of a registration, but I might buy a used Prius in Florida
all
and
right, thank
register
you
in
for that.
Vermont.
That's what I'm really trying to get.
Right.
So that includes new to me,
New
although
to
it's a
you.
used car.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
13% of new and 6% of all.
But it says new vehicle.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
yeah, just to make sure, to Senator Kitchell's point, we were gonna have action when we got to 15% new vehicle sales. of electric vehicles. And
And plug- or
is
plug-
it 13.2 with,
Just plugins.
That's my feeling. It's not a, it's just a guide, but yeah, I was thinking of things that have a plug, not hybrids.
So Experian Auto Count, which is the contractor we work with, only has data on new and used vehicles registered. So not renewed, not my car that I keep renewing every 2 years or 4 years, but new and used vehicles. So they're purchased and registered by a Vermonter or someone who lives in Vermont, has an address in Vermont. Going back historically, that's a different mathematical
Can you
challenge that I don't have
differentiate
yet.
Between a new car being registered and a used car that is new to the person registering, so we know out of new car sales, not registrations, how many would be EVs or the plug-in hybrids?
I can do that. What I can't do, and I can also differentiate whether they bought it in New Hampshire or another state.
I don't
and
care
register
about
one.
that.
But I know, and I'm just saying, but what I can't do, I'm sure showing you my limitations. I can do a lot of things, but my limitations are, I can't tell you what battery electric was a renewal. So if it was purchased 4 years ago and you renewed it, that wouldn't show up in this data. So the
There's no
numbers could,
registration.
yeah, the numbers could be larger, obviously, will be larger, because there's gonna be some universe of battery electric or plug-in hybrid that was purchased 4 years ago, and then they went and renewed it.
But this chart about most popular and registered,
Yeah.
which you were saying with the ICE vehicles, that's,
Break out by model.
no, that was a separate question, but these are not purchases, these are registrations, so include purchases and people just re-register.
No, they don't include re-registering.
So these are only purchased, just any of the first few slides that talk about purchased and registered.
Yeah, these are purchased and registered in Vermont. Don't know if they were purchased in Vermont, but we know that a Vermonter, someone with a Vermont address registered that has a new or used vehicle for the first time.
And so this that says
Purchase and
electric
register.
brand just registered, but really it's purchased and registered as well. These are only sales, not somebody that's just had a.
Yes, that's correct. They're registered in Vermont. I don't know where that Tesla, Nissan, Chevrolet, Volkswagen, Ford were purchased.
Well, it doesn't matter where it was purchased, but was it purchased, you're saying it was purchased this year, or it's just registered this year, but it could have been purchased 4 years ago?
It should have said purchased. Yeah, you're correct. I missed. Good catch. I'm gonna fix my.
And on this chart, it says purchased and registered in Vermont.
Yeah, that's what it should be on everyone. Purchased and registered.
Okay, so the out-of-state purchases
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be reflected here.
It would be reflected. The purchase is to imply that it's not a renewal. So I may register my car, but I bought it in 2015.
That's not counts, but
That's not
like
counts.
Drive Electric and AOT, I think, has that data on total registrations of these cars,
Of the universe, so existing.
Yeah.
Okay,
like the entire fleet.
Yeah. yeah, that would be helpful.
So the 15% that has been given, is it 15% new sales?
That's what they were saying.
I think it was,
Yeah.
I've always thinking it was the number of new cars coming onto
Yeah.
the market when it got to that percentage. So 13.2 is
That includes hybrid, so it's really.
Yeah.
less.
less.
That's my clarification point, because it's an important number, I think, for our policy body here. I have a hybrid, but it doesn't plug in. So this is plug-in hybrid. So even if it has gas, but also can plug in, that would count towards that percentage threshold in your mind,
I think so, yeah.
not entirely plug-ins.
It's gotta have a
It's not.
plug.
The 15% is not based on just only plug-in sourced cars.
That's how I interpret it. I don't know if somebody has a different view of that.
And it's only based on new car sales, not used cars being bought by somebody for the first time.
Where did the 15% come from? I don't.
It came
recall.
from the advocates saying that in order to encourage the take-up of electric vehicles, they were recommending not, that would be the trigger point to put in a method to get the equivalent revenue as they would if they were a gas vehicle. And so to make the T-fund whole. So we have looked at different models, and that would be, just a surcharge on your registration. I think a few years ago it was like $118, probably it's would be more now, would be on average the equivalent of what you would have paid in the state gas tax. Or then the other model is, vehicle miles traveled. And we've talked about, you could measure it based on mileage at time of last inspection. And then that would be the basis for the charge. So, but in testimony, we've always heard that 15% would be the trigger point to say, now's the time to kick in the revenue, whatever option is selected. Now, as I said, if you've got someone like my son, who's most of his mileage, he's registered in Vermont, but it's not using Vermont roads, that vehicle miles would, unless we had more sophisticated technology, you'd be paying for all the mileage between New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So it's not really a perfect replacement, but I guess everything is sort of a rough approximation of what would be the foregone gas tax revenues. That's my recollection of the 15% context.
Yeah, we might have come from a national, just kind of like market development kind of research. Jared, can I ask Michelle Boomer?
Oh, she was on TV last night.
Was she?
They already got a proposal which we were unaware of, that they're gonna tax mileage in Vermont.
Well, that's what I just said. You mean for the EVs, vehicle miles traveled?
Yeah, but so we're to disregard the tourists and everybody else.
No, we're gonna tax them on their level 3 chargers.
Well, that's my, well, I was
Why
gonna,
don't we tax everybody on the level on the charge?
Because they aren't using them, they're charging at home.
Or-
They
So
might-
you charge at home too. What difference does it make?
We don't have a way of segregating right now how much of it's for your refrigerator versus your car.
You have to have a separate, you have to have a separate hookup.
You don't have to have a separate meter.
You have to have different power source.
Your car will tell you.
Well, it's the same power it's like up for my, electric stove or my dryer.
You don't plug it into a wall.
No, you have to have a 220
Yeah,
line.
that's right, yeah.
you can plug it into a wall.
You could, level 1, then you want to wait a week.
Yeah. Just try it once a week.
All right, go right ahead with your question.
Yeah, so we did hear some updates from AOT at the beginning. I think even Secretary Flynn kind of mentioned this, but is there a more detailed presentation that AOT has on charging electric vehicles, either miles or for electricity, and making that up? Is there something coming that we didn't hear about, or does that question make sense?
It does. For the record, Michelle Boomhauer, my agency of transportation. So we do have a proposal in the transportation bill language that's being reviewed in the House right now to stand up a mileage-based user fee system. And we are going to be coming in next week to talk about that with you and give you the overview of what we're contemplating. We'll also, once the House Transportation Committee stabilizes on any modifications to the language, we'll be meeting with House Ways and Means to give them the overview. So that's our plan. I did want to just quickly slip back to the discussion of what's the % of vehicles sold that are either plug-in or all electric vehicles. Last quarter of calendar year 22, it was 5.2% of sales, just to give you an idea. And so our proposal, as we'll talk about next week, will place this system coming online July 1st, 2025, which we anticipate will be about the same time as the 15% of sales are made.
So stay tuned next week. Will you be giving that presentation or something?
It'll be a joint effort between myself, Commissioner Manoli, and Patrick Murphy, our program manager.
So,
Go ahead.
that's about the news.
So you're all right. These new electric plug-in cars are intelligent, smart cars, and
They
we
can tell
can,
you everything that they do.
if they're not registered in Vermont, then whenever they plug in, it's not far-fetched to think that we could.
They have
tax
the
them.
technology to do that, and we're missing the boat on it.
But we're talking taxes here.
That's okay.
So they're replacing the gas tax.
I get that.
Replacing the gas tax.
I get that. I really do. And I do believe that they should pay for the use of the road that they use, whether they're out of state or in state. In fact, we have a history in this state of charging out-of-state people more monies through the property tax and all of that. And these chargers and cars are smart enough to know when they're plugged in. And I think we're missing the boat.
Okay, so we're ready, back to you.
I don't know how much time I'm allotted. I appreciate everything, but I'd really like to talk to you a little bit about probably a voice you haven't heard, which is we have an energy policy which is encouraging adoption of non-combustion vehicles, electric vehicles, and certainly we have a regulation endorsed by the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, the producers of these cars to move in that direction. And in the middle is the dealership, right? The local dealer. So it's a stiff, steep climb, right? If we're going to get, as we are required to, under the Vermont's low and zero vehicle regulation, for the auto manufacturers to deliver to Vermont, ever increasing numbers, starting in 2026, 35% zero emission vehicles on our lots, up to 100% by 2035. That's a big lift. And we have different policies, as you know, whether it's federal incentives, utility incentives, state incentives, to encourage people to purchase battery electric or zero emission vehicles and high mileage vehicles. But there are certain investments that every franchise owner needs to make that differ based on who their franchisee is. So for instance, if I'm Toyota, a Toyota dealership is going to be required under their franchise agreement to have a certain number of DC fast chargers. The Ford dealer is going to have another set of requirements. Training is part of that. Just like you would have at any franchise, there's requirements that you must follow. Some of them will dictate how many battery electric vehicles, zero emission vehicles they get. So if you're a franchise owner in Texas, which hasn't adopted California's zero emission vehicle standards, you can decide, well, I don't care about making that investment. I'm just going to sell F-150s with a combustion engine. And you can continue to do that. You can continue to sell those, but they're going to have to deliver in increasing numbers electric vehicles. And if you don't make the investment in your store, or DC fast chargers in the front, 4 in the back, because you never want to sell a car without a full tank of gas. You don't want to sell it without electricity. If they come in for service or to take a demo ride, you want to absolutely be able to have that car charged and ready to go. Franchisees will also want certain stipulations to make sure that those chargers are open to the public. All of these things take time and money in order to achieve. And every day goes by, we're a little bit closer to that deadline. And by the way, there are over 20 states, but really 50 states that are trying to make this transition to electric vehicles, and the demand for transformers, for electricians to establish the phase 3 power in order to install these chargers. It's a challenge. And Patrick Murphy has done an amazing job working with myself on behalf of the convenience store operators and the car dealers, trying to figure out how we can access this federal funds, this National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Funds, which have been approved, to be able to get it where it's most appropriate, where we can build out this charging network, convenience stores, car dealers, but there are challenges in doing that. There are certain pieces that don't make it easy. If you own a car dealership where you don't have access to phase 3 power, and your franchisee requires, and as you should, have level 3 fast chargers, it's going to be more expensive than someone who, say, is more in the city and has access right there, or makes the early investment, is not waiting for the prices to go up.
The challenges to get to those numbers are not so much at the dealer level, manufacturer level, although it can be at the dealer level, but it's going to be the consumer who wants to buy the vehicle that works for them. As you can see in your numbers, about 2/3 of what's being sold are sports utilities and trucks and vehicles that aren't cars. I mean, manufacturers have gotten away from making cars because people don't want them. And unfortunately, the vehicles that are electric are cars. They're not, I mean, except for the Rivians and the Lightnings and stuff like that. But I don't think we're ever going to reach those numbers that we're looking to reach until the manufacturers build what the consumers are looking for in a way that can be used in everyday life. It's going to be tough.
So, in the dynamic that's going to play out as it affects tax policy over the next 10 years, which is New York, Massachusetts, and Vermont are aligned. New Hampshire is not. So if the manufacturers,
That's not unusual.
no, it's not. But as the manufacturers are required to deliver in a greater number zero emission vehicles to the ZEV states that have adopted the CARB standard, the California Air Resource Sport standards, they are going to have more choice. As a consumers are going to have more choice. If you're a consumer and you want your pick of color on an electric vehicle, you'll probably have a lot greater luck in 2030 going to the Hartford side or the White River Junction side of the Connecticut River than you will on the Lebanon side. But the reverse is also true. If you want a combustion engine vehicle, you're probably more likely to find the color, the make and model that you want in a combustion, so F-150 on the Lebanon side of the Connecticut River. That's just what's going to happen. And it could be good. It could be either way, you collect the purchase and use tax if it's a Vermonter. But it will have an effect on.
We could have people from New Hampshire coming over to buy electric vehicles,
That's
but we
absolutely
could have
right.
Vermonters going over there to buy ice.
You absolutely could see that dynamic. Or the auto manufacturers or the vehicle manufacturers can produce the vehicles that Vermonters are currently buying, if they continue to follow those trends, trucks and SUVs, in an affordable way that competes with combustion engine vehicles, and we build out the network that allows people to purchase those vehicles without charge anxiety. That's what we're going to play out over the next 10 years. It's an exciting time to be in this business. You're right.
Okay, next.
Lucky with you're going out.
Next is just to highlight a Senate Bill 48, which it's a small step, a very small step, but important step into highlighting what has been a growing problem, not just in Vermont, but across the country, which is the theft of catalytic converters for the precious metals that
Have
are
they ever thought
inside.
about changing what's in the catalytic converter, or is it impossible? They have to have whatever's in that chemical or what?
The precious metals, which help reduce the noxious stuff that comes out of the tailpipe.
Maybe it's gonna come to that someday if they, or, you know, I don't know.
Senator Chittenden and I fixed that, their bill.
Yeah.
But it's in Senate, it's in economic development.
Senator Ron Hinsdale, chair, said she was happy to release it, and then I just heard from Ashley this morning, I guess it will be released today, assuming the chair of transportation doesn't object.
What's it do?
Would refer it here then.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The whole idea is if someone shows up to a scrap metal
Oh, I
processor
see, they got a document.
with 10 brand new catalytic converters, right now, what the existing law says in Vermont is you're recommended, or what's the word? You should ask for, or do you own these? And what we're saying is, no, you have to show that you do own these. You can still sell catalytic converters back to a scrap metal because you might cut one off your car, but what we're seeing is people with a cordless Sawzall in the middle of the night, crawling under vehicles, cutting them off.
From RCT, our transit provider. And they had, I don't remember how many they lost in one night.
Yeah.
And it shut their
Yeah.
mobile.
One night and the next night.
Yeah. So it's not just car dealerships that they're seeking out.
It was like 50% of their whole fleet.
And what we're finding is that, first of all, the catalytic converters in gasoline cars are more valuable than diesel. So it's not hitting as many, while there is value, there are precious metals in diesel catalytic converters, there's not as much. And of course, electric vehicles don't have it. So theoretically, this isn't a problem for new car lots in 2035, but right now it is. And right now it's a real expense. Insurance typically doesn't cover it, and those cars are parked until you can get new cats in and replaced.
Is there any
So
thought of doing, is there any way of doing away with what the metal is in there from the manufacturers? That anybody?
oh boy,
No, I
that's
don't know.
above my pay grade, but that's a good
No,
question.
I just curious if they think about replacing it.
What are the precious metals anyway?
I'm not sure. I don't even know how they work or whatever, but it seems to be what they want, seems to be doing what they want to do.
And the other thing the bill does, it says you can only sell one per day.
People, not entities. So if you're a registered business, you can still sell, because if you're a scrapyard and you got these, that's fine. It's just individuals with just a driver's license can only sell one per day.
We don't, another way to crack down on it is if you stamp every cat converter. We have not proposed that in this law because you can see a patchwork creating problems. I concede that to the OEMs. However, there is a federal bill under consideration that would stamp the catalytic converters, which if you think about from a compliance standpoint, it makes more sense to do that from a national level.
Who's going to oversee the paperwork on that, of the junk dealers, or who's going to supervise?
I
That's
don't
a good
even know
question. I
what
think they just have to have
palladium
it on
is.
file. That way, if there is a concern and law enforcement comes by,
I know what
just like pawn
platinum
shops have to record names, they would just have to be responsible
So
for
you gotta
recording.
make sure that.
At least they know where to go to.
You gotta make sure the dealers are involved in the scam also, because that would be, you know, I mean, it's an issue that, it's a serious issue. No doubt about it.
And quite frankly, why we think this is an important bill, and we hope you support it. We also are wide eyes, know that in many cases, organized crime is taking the cats and they're bringing them out of state or out of country, putting it in a van and bringing it to other areas where.
So it's platinum, palladium, and
Rhodium.
rhodium. Those are-
Are they really getting the metal out, or are they just reselling that? Because when you're cutting a cat from a new vehicle, you're probably more valuable to sell it as a catalytic converter than the metal.
You can't reuse it. That's a problem. Even if you recovered, so if we went down to the scrapyard and said, hey, that's my cat, I recognize it. You couldn't attach it to a new car. A used
Just
car,
legally, or like-
you can't resell a new car with a reattached.
But you can
They-
reattach it,
they've
like
been-
you
they've
can
been-
weld it on
Yeah, but when you take a Sawzall to a catalytic converter at 2 a.m,
there. Yeah, you're not doing.
your
a
cuts
fine
aren't
cut.
perfect, and for you to sell that,
Yeah.
that might
Especially as
generate,
a new car, right?
a complaint to AutoCap. And
Okay, that was the last, anything else? That's it, there you go.
So, the bill's coming here then, it's
That's
gonna
my
be reversed.
Today,
That's my understanding.
that'll be the excitement on the floor.
That's the
I think we
back.
should stand up and ask questions. The bat will be
See
the,
where the bats move to.
yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to switch to Chris Rowe.
Right, well, yesterday I said that there are a couple of things and Andy and I, have gone through them, and they're in the budget adjustment. They relate to transportation, so we just didn't want to have any surprises in terms of, they're more technical, but they might raise questions, well, how come we didn't have that? Why didn't we spend that money in, town highway structures or, whatever? So this was just to give you a briefing on the transportation related pieces in the BAA.
At 9:45.
Yeah, and it's 9:45 right now, and Chris is just gonna run through what the AOT changes are recommended, what the governor proposed and the House passed. And, you know, unless there's some objection, we would confer.
Oh, so that's, has a German, okay, good, thank you, all right, go right ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Chris Roop from the Joint Fiscal Office. As Senator Kitchell noted, I've been asked just to sort of give you a brief rundown of the highlights in the FY23 Budget Adjustment Act. As she accurately noted, many of these changes are sort of technical in nature. There's not a lot of surprises really in it. Nothing quite as exciting as refunding the TIP bonds like last year, but there are a few things here that might be of interest.
Nothing that protects these two from any automobile.
Unfortunately not,
We
but
have two on the committee now. so-
there's plenty of time to add amendments though. The first change, which was proposed by I'm just going to sort of run through a lot of these, so when you see it in the language, you won't be surprised. And
So we
it'll
have-
resonate with you, but
What, in the what language would this committee see it in?
Joins in the BAA.
it will be in the BAA.
Right, so if this committee was to read the BA,
Yeah,
they
but
would see the language.
we would, but this is just a way of telling you what that language.
I just don't know if you had a handout or.
No.
I do not, I just have some notes to run through, but the first change that was proposed by the administration and agreed to by the House was a revenue neutral shift of T funds and TIP funds. The July 22 revenue forecast downgraded the T fund, but upgraded the TIP fund. And in order to make the appropriations match that revenue forecast, the administration had proposed reducing the T fund appropriation by 3.2 million and increasing the TIP fund appropriation by 3.2.
It just moved the money.
Exactly. Doesn't change any project. It's just making sure that the appropriations line up with the revenue forecast.
Okay.
Second item was the DMV computer project was funded in the big bill out of a new technology modernization special fund that was created in the 23 big bill. There was language in that bill that would essentially fund this through a contingent appropriation, where if the general fund funding materialized at the end of 23, it would go into this special fund and then could be used to pay for the project. The money materialized, so we're good to go. The project's moving forward, but the big bill language omitted the language to explicitly appropriate the dollars out of the special fund to the computer project. So you'll see a little bit of cleanup language in there just to make that appropriation explicit. Doesn't do anything to change the project. It's just making sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that the legal authority is there to appropriate.
Spending authority.
Exactly.
Any questions? Okay.
No, but that's, I'll ask Jane after.
There's one other
Put
thing
the
that
money in the fund, but we didn't give the authorization to spend it.
spend it out of the fund. It hasn't delayed the project.
No, it's just back to more in depth of the monies and all that stuff, but the monies it's already been approved. It's just, I get why we're doing this, and I don't want to hold up committee time to a question I have that's separate.
One other thing which is really small is you'll see a transfer of $720,000 from the TIP debt service fund to the TIP fund. You remember last year's BAA, the TIP bonds were paid off. So there is no more TIP bonds outstanding, no more debt service commitment. So that amount of money represents the residual balance that was left in the debt service fund. So we would move that out of the debt service fund over to the TIB fund, and it is then available for appropriation in the FY24 budget. And the FY24 governor's recommended budget spends those dollars. But that's what that mechanics is we don't need money in that account anymore since we don't have any outstanding debt. One other thing that will likely get your attention a little is you'll see a $20.7 million reversion of transportation funds. Those are unexpended appropriations from prior years. The governor's recommend included this reversion in the FY24 big bill, but it's my understanding that Senate Appropriations is considering moving that into the BAA just to sort of get it over and done with. What that 20.7 million represents is unexpended appropriation balances at the end of FY22. The agency is proposing reverting those unexpended appropriations back to the T fund
And
to
then
make
spend them again.
and then making them available to spend in FY24. Exactly. The FY24 proposal already spends that money. A lot of that money, 13 million and change, comes from unexpended balances in the town highway structures and class 2 grant
And
programs.
this is the part that I thought people should know about, because why should it be that big?
Right. It's this list, right?
That's exactly right. And you will also find that list in the early pages of your white book with the summary charts. But the reason why there's those unexpended balances in those 2 town grant programs is due to a cash flow issue. The way these programs work, and I see Michelle was here to keep me honest, and the other body took a lot of testimony on this the other week, but statute requires the agency to put a minimum number of grant awards out every year, but it takes time for the money to actually go out the door, because these are done on a reimbursement basis. So a town has to then do a project and then submit the paperwork and get reimbursed. So it can take several years after the time a grant award is made until the awards are fully paid out. Bradley from the agency presented to House Transportation a sort of overview of what the unexpended balances have been historically, and they've been significant. What the agency is proposing is, instead of having those unexpended T fund balances just sort of sitting there waiting to be spent, to revert those unexpended appropriations and then budget on more of a cash basis moving forward. So instead of budgeting sort of more than they expect to pay, they would be budgeting in the future based on what they expect their payout activity would be. This change does not change any pre-existing commitments to fund.
It doesn't mean a reduction.
Not at all.
And reversions are where you're using estimates, and oftentimes, same thing can be true in, I suppose, the capital bill.
Yeah.
And it comes in lower. or for a particular project, and it comes in lower than if we'd appropriated 100,000 and the actual comes in 90, then that 10,000 that's not used would be reverted. So we have reversions, we have direct applications. This gets into the arcane business of budgeting, but
And
so this is just a way of kind of cleaning up those hanging set aside monies and moving to a different methodology of accounting for the cost.
The town's missed out on $20.7 million.
No.
No, that's the important thing that people would say, did, for example, we had,
Looks like that, though.
Right.
and that's why we thought it would be important that people understood what this is really about.
And sort of an analogous way of thinking of this is the capital bill and the white book. Whenever the state does big construction projects, let's say there's a $10 million bridge project that's going to take a few years. We don't wait until all $10 million are in the bank before we start. We budget based on when we think the expenses will hit. So that is essentially what would be happening here. The last time there were really big reversions of this magnitude were right around COVID, where I think it was in FY 21 or so, there was about 44 million or so of reversions because the T-fund revenues were tanking because nobody was driving or buying gas or buying cars at the time. So that's why it looks a little big right now, but we've had big reversions in the past when finances are getting a little tight. You'll see two technical corrections in the language that exclude reversion amounts from appropriation totals used to calculate the T-fund stabilization reserves. This is a long way of saying that these changes are technical cleanup language that will not change the amount of money that's already in the stabilization reserves. The way the law is worded is your stabilization reserve is capped at 5% of the prior fiscal year's appropriations. But the calculation excluded reversions that happened in those prior years, but the language didn't match. So this language, which was proposed by the administration and concurred with by the House, is just technical cleanup. It's not going to make any extra money available. It's cleanup. You will see an adjustment proposed in the rail appropriation of $3.5 million. The agency is essentially just proposing to shift $3.5 million of eligible expenses off the T-fund and onto federal funds. Again, doesn't change the scope of any project, doesn't mean we're not doing anything, but that $3.5 million of T-funds that would be freed up are spoken for in the governor's proposal in FY 20.
Don't worry, they scooped it one way and spent the other.
There is no change left on the bottom line of either funds in FY 24, which is sort of standard operating procedure. The last thing is, and this is a topic of conversation that wasn't included in the governor's recommend, but the House did add it, was the House had moved $100,000 of general funds out of the Replace Your Ride program into the e-bike incentive program. The e-bike program exhausted all of their available funds, all $100,000, very quickly this year. Replace Your Ride had roughly $2.5 million unspent as of about a month ago. So what the House proposed doing, and this is revenue neutral in the big picture, is take 100,000 of the unexpended appropriation from Replace Your Ride and move it to e-bikes. And the rationale for doing that in the BAA was to make sure that that program had funding going into the spring bike purchasing season.
So that's good. It just makes me pause to why we want to raise the bike incentive when already we're exhausting it. So obviously what we're doing, what we set up for incentives is working. We're selling more bikes, we've exhausted it. Why do we want to raise it higher if we're already spending the money that we?
So it goes from what, 100 to 200?
I think it goes almost to 300.
There was $100,000 appropriated for the program, which is exhausted.
Yeah.
This VAA proposes adding another $100,000
Oh
to
my
it.
God. Oh, that's what I heard.
Which I'm fine with, but now we're looking to raise the incentive as well. So that $100,000, which pushes us right back to the
No, I
same.
don't think it's just the number of people eligible for the incentive is greater.
So it's
It
maxed
doesn't-
out at 100,000?
Yeah, it doesn't increase the amount of the incentive itself that.
I thought I saw someplace that we were raising it,
Yeah,
that we're doubling it.
still $100 or what? Yes.
We are doubling the amount of money available to support the incentives.
Which I'm fine with.
Because the take-up rate has been higher than the 100,000 can
Because so my thought process was, and I apologize, is that we were ready to put another $100,000 in, but we doubled the incentive.
No.
And that didn't come from this conversation, it come from something else I thought that we'd covered. And so we're just back to the same place we were. We're gonna run out of money before we can
Well-
recognize that all these people have
Yeah,
bumped in.
and let me put it this way, because this is really something we encounter in all other parts of the budget. It's when you're building the budget, you're using estimates.
Yeah.
And in this case, the estimate that was used for replace your ride was higher than was necessary based on actual. On the other hand, the e-bike incentives, the take-up rate was higher than anticipated. So this is something we do all the time, and that's true up and move money between appropriations based on, because you have the benefit of actual experience at this point in the fiscal year. So another example would be our childcare caseload was overestimated. It didn't mean anyone got turned away, the subsidy was changed, but when you use estimates. On the other hand, the reach-up caseload was underestimated, and the number of families that were eligible and receiving benefits, that the caseload estimate was too low. So that's an example of, with the benefit of actual experience, and we're through almost 3/4 of the fiscal year at this point, then it allows you to true up between appropriations and the assumptions that were used in those appropriations. So this is not unique to transportation. It's just a matter of, now you could say, well, we don't, I guess we could say, well, we don't care if the take-up rate is higher and there are people standing, and that we actually, what we would do is revert this money that's in replace your ride or move it somewhere else, because it's, so the proposal from the House is
What's
simply
the,
to move it.
what's the rebate, $100? On the price of the bike, or what are electric bikes, $300?
One of the ones I did, when I did a analysis, I showed Andy and Tom, is that it looked like the rebates actually, on that one program, the rebates came up to over $328 per bike on that one program. But I don't know where I could find that, but whatever.
I
But
thought there was a ceiling on it.
I'm probably talking more than what I should talk about, because it is what it is. James explained it. I'm fine with that, and I assumed that somewhere along the way that we'd actually raise the incentive. So I'm good. I'm good without spending a lot of time on that. Unless the chair's
Well,
got.
no, I just want to know what the incentive is.
Yeah.
$100 a bike?
No, Mr. Chair,
It's in the statute, I'm sure.
yeah, we could send around the program guidelines, but it is based on income and the price of the bike. So if the new e-bike cost is less than $800, it is, the incentive amount is 50% of the sale price. If it costs greater than that, it's capped at $400.
So, I mean, $800 for an electric bike, you're gonna get $400?
A max of that. If the e-bike costs,
If they can qualify,
correct.
And that's on
There's
earnings?
income qualifications, yes.
that's on earnings.
It's on earnings, yes, it's on adjusted gross income and household.
Yeah, can we hit- can
That's
we
what
have it
we
right
passed
here?
last year.
Then we had it right here. We had incentive spending, $92,018. We had 279 incentives used. And so with $482 left in the incentive, and it came out to $329.81 per incentive. And that's
Yeah,
right.
based on this formula,
Yeah.
depending on the income of the
Correct.
applicant, their income eligibility, and setting maximums on the purchase price as well.
Correct. And if you're a higher earner, what the numbers I was just rattling off are, if you're an individual earning 50,000 or less, or a married couple earning 75,000 or less. If you're a little bit higher income and you're between 50 and 100,000 single, or 75,000 to 125,000 married, the incentives are a little bit less. If the bike costs less than $833, it's 30% of the sale price. If it's more than $833, it's capped at $250.
Anything above that,
And the ability to pay then.
there's an income tier.
That's the way,
Yes.
that's the way the deals for schools should be, on the ability to pay.
And that's what we passed last year.
Bob,
And again, I apologize for all this. I'm fine,
Just
I'm fine
clarify.
with what, all that was.
I didn't know.
So that's what budget adjustment is truing up based on, estimates and then versus the actual experience.
Michelle, you had something?
Yes, Senator Mazza, for the record, Michelle Boomhauer, Agency of Transportation. I just want to clarify one point. Senator Kitchell, you mentioned the potential of reversion of the Replace Your Ride funds. Last year, you would call that for Replace Your Ride, the new PEV incentive, the e-bike incentive, and also EV infrastructure incentive funding or construction funding. A significant amount of money, which was anticipated to last about 3 years, was used, mostly general fund money, for these programs. And so one of the things to recognize is the Replace Your Ride program is just barely coming online. So that's why we haven't had any expenditures in that category yet.
And you probably would want to carry forward anyway,
Yeah, we would want to carry forward that along with the other programs.
not revert.
To create this block. So while it is taking a bit off the top of Replace Your Ride, there's still a fair amount of capacity there. This was a recommendation of the House Transportation Committee, not the administration. And the administration doesn't have funding in our program recommend for the budget for FY24 for the e-bike program, just to clarify where we are on that.
So there's no way we can get your refund, Senator Chitty. Sorry, we talked about it last year. You were over that, so.
But can I ask Michelle, so the governor's not recommending continuing the e-bike incentive, but e-bikes can be part of Replace Your Ride
Yes, that is true.
if they meet the qualification.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks,
So
sir.
it's just one small piece of what we're dealing with in budget adjustment.
I'd say that bike is the only really policy
Yeah.
part in that thing.
And it's not, it's not like establishing a new program,
Right.
it's just,
And when I was looking for that, I found some of the language about the AAFM, the weights and measures money in that FY24 budget. At some point, this committee will want to just, because we haven't heard that in here, that's being, I don't think anybody from AOT is talking about that.
We haven't, so we would be looking forward to bringing that conversation in with Agency of Agriculture and our staff.
Yeah, so that would be a good thing, Mike, to maybe, I don't know, if we do the DMV bill first, and then, because would that be, that's part of the T bill, or that's being done somewhere else, just in the budget?
The policy framework for that appropriation request has already been laid in prior years.
Yeah.
So, so there's no specific policy language.
I'm
but-
hoping we could have Senator Ash back to talk about
Yes.
this. Yeah,
I know, he visited,
I know.
and, with Boulder is their headquarters.
Yeah. Send me photos.
Yeah, me too. Because ag does all the weights and measures, so that you're making sure the gallonage is right for grocery stores, the weights are right, that your scales are not, a pound is really a pound.
They cover it.
Yeah, they do,
Yeah,
but
we
it's
want-
ag that does all
Yeah.
that.
So we wanted to do it for electric chargers, so that when you buy a kilowatt hour, you really know it's a kilowatt hour that
Good
you're
idea.
going to charge and ramp that up. Because before they said there isn't enough of them to worry about.
The gas station.
Yeah, it's just, that's right, same,
They pump a
same,
gallon of gas in a can.
it's the same concept, yeah.
Dollar for a gallon of gas.
So they want to make sure that you're getting,
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
so. All right, I guess we've taken care of that one too.
Well, we want to have them in. I'd like to hear more about it.
Oh,
And hopefully,
Who's coming in?
well, I think we should have Tim.
Yeah, let's have Tim.
Somehow figure out.
He's in Montpelier, well, he's supposed to be in Montpelier, he's at home.
yeah,
Yeah, that'd be great to have him over.
I don't think he has anything to do with it.
he did brief us on his visit to NIST.
Yeah, I'd like to see Tim.
Because we were waiting for the NIST standards. That's what AAFM was saying was they can't do it until the NIST standard is done. Now that the NIST standard's done, they have something to compare to.